All right, let's get right into it. The Ponzi scheme. It's one of the most infamous stories in the history of money. But what if I told you that the story we all think we know is a lie, and that the real story is so much bigger, starting half a century before the guy who gave the scam its name was even a player?
Everything starts with a promise. A promise that sounds way too good to be true, because, well, it absolutely is. 50%. That's the return on your investment you were guaranteed, in just 90 days. I mean, think about that. At the time, your local bank was offering maybe 5% for an entire year.
And that unbelievable promise is what made Charles Ponzi a household name back in 1920. It's the very reason we call this kind of fraud a Ponzi scheme. But, as you're about to see, he was anything but the original.
To really understand why history got this so wrong, we have to start with the legend himself. So, let's set the scene. It's Boston, 1920. A very charismatic Italian immigrant is about to become one of the most famous men in America.
Ponzi's whole operation was built on this genius but totally bogus story. He told everyone he was making a fortune by trading something called international reply coupons. It was so complicated, so confusing, that most people just nodded along and took his word for it. And that confusion was the key. It allowed him to rake in a mind-blowing $15 million in just 8 months. The newspapers went crazy, and that media storm is what really cemented his name in the history books.
So yeah, Ponzi gets all the fame, but what is this thing he put his name on? Let's break down the actual mechanics of how this classic fraud really works.
At its heart, it's brutally simple. There's no secret investment. There are no actual profits. It's just moving money around. The person running the show takes money from new investors, like you, and then uses that exact same money to pay the profits to the folks who got in earlier. It gives off this perfect illusion of a thriving business, but the whole thing is just a house of cards waiting to fall.
And this is the life cycle, every single time. It kicks off with that insane promise. Then, the first wave of investors get their money. And guess what? They become walking, talking advertisements. They tell their friends, their family, everyone. And that creates a stampede of new cash. But here's the catch, and it's always step 4. The scheme is a parasite. It has to have a constant supply of new money to live. The second that new money dries up, the whole thing implodes, and nearly everybody loses every penny. Now, a lot of people hear this and think, wait, isn't that just a pyramid scheme? And that's a fair question, but there's a really important difference. In a Ponzi, your job is to just be a passive investor. You hand over your cash and wait for the checks to roll in. But in a pyramid scheme, the whole game is about recruiting. You have to constantly bring in new people under you to make any money. So, one is disguised as an exclusive investment, the other's all about building a recruitment empire.
Okay, so we have the man, we have the definition, we've got the legend, all wrapped up. But right here, this is where the whole story takes a massive turn. What if this exact financial machine was already built and running at full steam decades earlier? What if it was perfected by people that history has almost completely forgotten?
So, let's jump in our time machine. We're going back past World War I, past the turn of the century, all the way back to the Gilded Age. We are officially on the hunt for the true pioneers of the Ponzi scheme.
And this timeline really puts it all into perspective. Just look at those dates. 1869, a full 50 years before Ponzi even got started, a woman named Adele Spitzeder was running a massive version of this in Germany. And then, a decade after that, Sarah Howe was doing the exact same thing right in Boston, Ponzi's future stopping grounds. He wasn't an innovator, he was just late to the party. So let's open our first case file. This is the person with the strongest claim as the true originator of this scam, Adele Spitzeder. She was a German actress who became a criminal mastermind.
You think Ponzi's returns were nuts? Spitzeder's promise makes his look tame. She was offering 10% interest every single month. Her target audience was brilliant, working-class folks who felt the big banks looked down on them. And her tactic was pure social engineering. She cultivated this image of a deeply religious woman who just wanted to help the little guy. The scale of her operation was just huge. We're talking over 30,000 victims.
All right, next up, let's look at the American contender who really perfected this on U.S. soil. Her name was Sarah Howe, and just like Spitzeder, she used the cover of charity and religion to hide her crime.
Howie opened up something called the Ladies' Deposit right there in Boston, promising an incredible 8% interest a month.
Her real innovation was targeting a very specific and often vulnerable group of people, unmarried women. She pitched her operation as a Quaker charity, designed to help women who were shut out of the financial world run by men. It was a really powerful story and completely deceptive.
So, when you lay all the evidence out side by side like this, the conclusion is just impossible to ignore. Spitzeder in 1869, Howe in 1878. They were running the exact same playbook as Charles Ponzi just decades before he was. They had the unbelievable promise, they had the flood of new money paying off the old investors, and they had the spectacular collapse. The only thing missing was the name.
And that really brings us to the final verdict. The historical record is crystal clear. Yeah, Charles Ponzi was the most famous, but Adele Spitzeder was the one who first turned this scam into a massive, institutionalized fraud. She's the true matriarch of the scheme that would, kind of unfairly, end up bearing another man's name.
Okay, so we've just rewritten a little piece of financial history, but why does digging up this 150-year-old story actually matter today? Because it turns out, while the names and the stories change, the architecture of the lie, that never does. It all comes down to this one core idea. We'll call it the complexity shield. This is that super elaborate, jargon-filled cover story. The secret trading strategy, the exclusive access, whatever. It's all designed to make you feel too confused or too intimidated to ask the hard questions. It's a smokescreen to hide the simple fact that they're just stealing your money. And you can see how that shield just evolves with the times. For Ponzi, it was postal coupons. For Howe and Spitzeder, it was philanthropy. Today, well, today's scammers use the language of our era. They talk about secretive trading algorithms, exclusive crypto assets, decentralized finance. The tech changes, the buzzwords change, but the scam underneath is exactly the same. So, from a phony bank in Munich in 1869, all the way to a sketchy crypto fund today, the core DNA is timeless. You have the impossible promise, you have the mechanism that robs Peter to pay Paul, and you have the inevitable, disastrous collapse. It's a 150-year-old play that just keeps getting revived with a new cast and new props. Which leaves us with one last and maybe kind of disturbing question. We've known about this exact type of fraud for more than a century and a half. We know how it starts, we know how it works, and we know exactly how it ends. So, why does it still work? Why do we as human beings keep falling for the exact same lie over and over again?